instead of the file icon, I am now blocking the bedstore.jpg image. Okay, so the bedstore.jpg is essentially this image here. Okay, and this is what you see in Firefox. You see the image is actually downloaded, and this is what you see in Chrome. Okay, for the bedstore.jpg, you got the specify URL is not found. Okay, cannot be found. This is the 404 error that the WAF throws it. So that's basically the configuration of global ACLs. So there must have been a typo. I will try later with the file icon, but this is how it works, basically. So after URL protection, we have parameter protection. Now, parameter protection will allow you to specify specific limit in the parameters, like, for example, in the value of a parameter, in the one that basically you can put null characters, parentheses, single quotes, and so on. You can specify the value length, the instances, how many times a parameter should be seen, and so on. This is also used to regulate file uploads in terms of size. Okay. Remember that if you go above 25 megabytes of size and the antivirus is enabled, you have to call Barracuda support to change your configuration of the WAF, because there is a hard limit in the antivirus configuration settings, which is 25 megabytes. Okay, if you want to have more, then you have to call Barracuda support. They will increase this limit by accessing your web application firewall. Otherwise, 25 is the limit for file upload. Okay. No, I'm pretty sure that the file icon that we see is not the cached one, because it was not blocked by the WAF. So there was a typo in the configuration. So how do we configure parameter protection? We go to security policies, parameter protection, and these are the denied meta characters. You have a very nice widget here that you can choose. For example, if you want to specify the $sign, you see the null, the EOT character, yes character, and so on. You just have to select what you don't want. For example, you can specify a single quote, and so on. This is the maximum parameter value, okay, for any parameter. The maximum instances, so how many times the parameter should be seen. It is trapped using the parameter name, of course. If we want to validate the parameter name, the file uploads, which files are we allowing, GIF, JPEG, PDF, this is for upload, okay? Again, we have the maximum upload file size and the block attack types, okay? So you can select which type of attacks you want to filter in the parameter now. Last policy for the request is the action policy. Now, the action policy specifies what is the action that should be taken when one of the previous sub-policies are violated. Okay, like you have a request that is busting the limit of the maximum request length. What is going to happen? Is it going to be blocked? Is it going to be allowed? Is it going to be discarded? Okay, this is what you can set in the action policy. You can also set a follow-up action. Okay, and I will explain this using the WAF. So we go to advanced action policy. All right, so these are all the policies, and this is the action in case we have a violation. So protect and log the response, send the response with the default response page. Okay, so for example, if we have request length exceeded, protect and log, send response default, we click edit. We can say protect with no log. We don't want to see this in the logs, in the web firewall logs. Allow and log means, all right, I know there is a problem, but still I will allow this and I will log it. I will fix it later. Okay. If we select protect and log, you can send close the connection. This is reset, TCP reset, send the response page, temporary or permanent redirect. You can also configure a follow-up action. The follow-up action could be block the client IP for 60 seconds, okay, in this case, or challenge with a CAPTCHA. The WAF has an internal engine for CAPTCHAs. So the WAF will generate a page with a CAPTCHA saying, all right, you have a request that is bigger than the limits. So are you really a human? Okay, or you are a bot that is trying to, for example, scan my web application for vulnerabilities. In that case, the CAPTCHA will basically be there until it's answered and the user cannot do anything. Okay, block IP is set here in the limit. Okay, 60 seconds, 1 hour, you can put whatever you want. Okay, just be careful because this is the public IP address as seen from the WAF. So if you have another 500 people NATed with the same IP address, you're going to block 500 people. Okay, so always when you configure these actions, always consider what is the source. Okay, so in this case, let's put none here. Okay, so this was the last sub-policy that we have for the request. The next sub-policy is actually configured for the response, and it is called cloaking. Cloaking will basically allow you to hide all the information from your servers before they are sent to the users. Like, you can strip out the server banner, so you no more will see, hi, I am Apache version whatever, and so on. You can strip out all the status codes. Okay, so even the 404 status code can be translated to a 200 code. So this will basically cloak anything that is happening to your web application, so the user doesn't really know what is happening. Okay, cloaking is enabled by default, and you can configure it in the security policies cloaking. And you basically say, yeah, I want to filter the headers. Okay, and the headers are server, ASP.NET version, powered by, and you can also exempt some codes. Like, for example, if you really want to show a forbidden page to the user, just type 4.3. That makes sense. Okay, maybe you want to exempt 101, switching protocols. Okay, so these are basically the exempted codes that the WAF will actually generate when it's everything it's going to not in the exempted list would be translated to a 200. Everything it's fine, everything it's okay. All right. Then we have the last sub-policy, which is data theft protection. Now, data theft protection will allow you to look for some patterns in the response, and these patterns can be anything like a credit card number, social security number, the social security number for your country, it could be Germany, Italy, whatever. You can actually search for other patterns like sensitive patterns of the web application, like directories or file names, and so on. And then you can tell the WAF, block the connection, so drop the response, and send a generic response to the user, like the default page. Or you can cloak this type of information, like, for example, with credit card numbers. Now, in this case, if we want to configure data theft protection, we have to go to the data theft protection page, and we have to specify an element name, and then we can set the identity theft type. Okay, social security numbers is only valid for the US market, right? So if you live in Europe, that doesn't work, even for Japan, I think. We got, as you can see here, we have PHP errors, Microsoft errors, MySQL errors. So all these errors will be basically removed. Okay, the system will basically block the connection. We have an example here with credit card numbers. We have credit cards as a type, and then the action is cloak. When you configure cloak as an action, you can specify the initial characters and the trailing characters, so the last characters that you want to show to the user. This is what happened, for example, when you browse on Amazon, and Amazon will allow you to save your credit card into their web application, and then it will ask you, all right, which credit card shall I use for this transaction? And then you can pick up the credit card by looking at the last 4 digits. That's the same concept, okay? You're going to show only the last 4 digits. Now, as you can see, we can configure data theft protection in terms of data types in this sub-policy, but data theft protection is not applied in the sub-policy. So we're going to configure it, yes, but we're not going to enable it. In order to enable data theft protection, we have to go into another section that is called Advanced Security. And this is a topic that, this is the next topic that we will cover in a minute. So, do you have any questions regarding anything that we have seen in the security policy section? There is a question that URL and parameter protection seems to cover the same thing. So it confuses a little bit. Yes, this thing actually confuses a little bit. All right. What you normally have to define is that whatever is configured at macro level, okay, it is in the URL protection. Macro level is, for example, the method. Okay, this is something that you have in the request line. The loud content type. So this is something that basically defines the whole request. The maximum content length. So it's a very big limit for the request. Okay, so these are very general limits for your request. Then, if you want to go more in detail, then you go into the parameter protection. And in the parameter protection, you have something more specific, like, for example, the maximum parameter value length. So it is for the parameters. It's not for the request. It's not just for the whole thing. It's for the parameter. For example, allowed file types. So which are the file types were allowed in the request? What is the, for example, maximum upload file size? Again, specific to the file size. So to the file type. So you have to see URL protection as macro, and then parameter protection, we go into the details. Okay. Again, since these are security policies, the settings that you configure here are applied to all the requests. Okay. As you can see, you cannot set a URL or a host here. It means that any request that has the bad store security policy, any request that will go into the service that has the bad store security policy assigned to it will be filtered by these policies. So they are very generic. Okay, they have to handle the, let's say, they are the first line of defense. Okay, anyway, we will cover again URL protection and parameter protection when we will discuss about website profiles. Any other questions or observations? All right. So we have now configured our security policy. So we have a baseline configuration that we can use for our web application. But in the security policy, we don't have all the modules of the WAF active. Some modules are missing, like, for example, the antivirus was not there. Brute force prevention was not there. RAID control was not there. Okay, so essentially there are some additional modules that you can use in the WAF which are not configured in the security policies. Why? Because security policies, as I said before, they are generic. Okay, they will handle all the traffic for that service. URL policies, which is the topic that we are going to introduce now, are configured per URL. And you can enable specific modules for specific URLs. For example, let's say that you have a login page, okay? And you want to prevent that somebody will do brute force attacks against this login page. So using username and password with a dictionary attack, for example. You can enable this module just for that login page. It doesn't make sense to enable brute force prevention in the home page. Who cares about the home page? Okay, unless you have a login input field in the home page, and I hope you don't. Okay, so essentially this is enabling more modules of the WAF. So with the security policies, we can increase the security of our web applications. Now, where do we put security URL policies in the context of the sub-policies? URL policies are applied after the action policy, and we also have another feature that is called session tracking that will allow you to track down how many sessions are actually opened. Okay, and we will discuss about this in a moment. Now, how do you create URL policies? If we go to the WAF, we go to Websites, Advanced Security, and in the Advanced Security section, you can create your policies per service. By default, there is a default URL policy with nothing enabled in it that will basically trap all the traffic. My suggestion is don't use it. All right, just create your own security policy and specify where that policy should be used. Okay, you can delete the default policy. Nothing will happen. Okay, it's not important from fundamental from an operational point of view. Okay, so you create your policy. It could be, for example, that the host match is WAF service 00.curiou.org. The URL match is /login.php, for example, and you don't have an extended match. Do you want to put it in passive or active? That's up to you. Maybe you are creating a policy. You don't know if it will really work, so you put it into passive mode so you can actually log it, and then you enable all the modules. Okay, now I will discuss about these modules in a moment. The first module that you can enable is the antivirus. Antivirus is available on, let's say, the higher-end models from 660 to higher models, and will allow you to scan all file uploads and downloads. Okay, so it makes sense that you enable the antivirus only on specific parts of your web application. You don't want to scan everything every time that the web application is accessed, right? So we use ClamAV as an antivirus engine, and we use the open source definitions plus our own definitions. Okay, the antivirus signatures are updated by the Energize updates. Okay, so I will show you actually where this is configured. Okay, so if you want to enable the antivirus in the configuration of your policy, you just look for Enable Virus Scan, you set to yes. Okay, now where are the definitions saved? Let's go to Advanced, Energize Updates. All right. Here we have virus definition updates. By default, the system will automatically update all your definitions. Okay, so it will check if there are new definitions. It will download and install the definitions for you. Okay, now I forgot to mention something regarding security policies. For the attacks, for the attack patterns, we update the patterns the same way that we do for the virus patterns. Okay, we have the attack definitions, and with the attack definitions, we're going to update, for example, SQL injections, cross-site scripting, and so on. So this is how we update the database of the patterns. Now, you might have a problem, though, with the new patterns, because let's say that we create a new pattern for cross-site scripting. Then the system automatically updates the attack definition, and then your application breaks because the WAF is starting to filter in connections that normally should be allowed because of this pattern. Now, you can change the configuration of the new patterns. If you go to System Configuration, okay, you see there is a section that is called Advanced Settings. You click Yes here, and you click Save. All right, and you scroll down, and you will say, what is the default pattern mode for new patterns, the patterns that we're pushing through Energize Update? In this case is put the mode into passive. Okay, so you will still see it in the logs, but the mode will not be enforced just for that pattern. Or for updated patterns, so patterns that exist already in the WAF, they are just changed a little bit, maybe to include more characters. Well, in that case, the default mode is active. Okay, that's default configuration. If you want, you can basically turn it off and then do the configuration by hand. Okay, so review every time the configuration and so on. Okay, so this was a topic for security policies. Another module that you can enable in the URL policies is the brute force protection. Okay, as I said before, you might have a login page that requires you to enter username and password, and you are worried because people might use this technique, brute force attacks, to actually guess the password. Again, as I said yesterday, there are some web applications, also very widely known, widely used web applications like OWA, that are suffering by some attacks like user enumeration attacks. Okay, you can just guess the user, just put an email address and a password, random password. If the username is right, the web application will show it to you, will stick the username in the input field. So you can actually note down what are the valid usernames. What you do next, you use some other tools, which I will not explain in this course. You will then target the password field, and then you're going to hack the specific account. Okay? One of these tools is, for example, Fuzzer. Okay? Just to maintain this topic in a generic format. All right. Now, with brute force protection, what you can do is basically you can limit the amount of requests from a single IP address in a time frame. Okay, so we are dealing with IP addresses because the WAF doesn't know that that is a login page. Okay, you can enable brute force protection anywhere. It could be also a page that is used to send resets for the passwords. And after that, for example, you can set maximum of 3 requests, okay, in 60 seconds. The 4th request is going to be blocked. Okay? The keyword here is IP address requests. Okay? So the amount of requests per IP address in a time frame. This is important because if your page is made of 5 elements, and to load that page, you need 5 requests, and you set the limit to 5, your users, your poor users, would never be able to log in because the login would be the 6th request. So you have to somehow configure a limit which will allow the users to download the page and then to make the request to then log in into your web application. Moreover, since we are talking about public IP addresses, you have to be careful because you might have users that are coming from the same IP address that are accessing your web page. So what happened then? Well, if you have multiple concurrent connections from the same IP address within the same time frame, in that case, you might block more users, right? So essentially, what you configure in the brute force protection is, actually, I will have to edit the default policy because this is one of the settings, the few settings that if you don't save, you don't get all the options. So in brute force protection, you first enable it, okay? Then you specify the count window, that is 60 seconds, for example, and the maximum allowed request per IP, okay, per public IP address, or from all sources. Okay, so it doesn't matter who is generating the request. I only allow maximum of 100 requests every 60 seconds to my page. Whoever is, I don't know, the 101st request will be blocked. Okay, now, if this confuses you, I will show an example of a very well formatted login page. We go to google.com. We click login. That's the login page of Google. Okay? Simple, very simple. Just one input field with just one thing that you can enter, the email address. So we already start the filtering process using the email address. Okay? So you first have to have a valid email address, and then you will be able to enter your password. Okay? So if we analyze this page, let's bypass the cache. As you can see, this page is made of 5 requests. That's a good page, actually. It's a very good page. You're not downloading a whole website and then you say, OK, by the way, if you want to log in, go here. It doesn't work that way. OK? So login pages normally look like that, like this. If they don't, it means that the web developers didn't know what they were doing, OK, or didn't consider web application security when they were doing this kind of pages. OK? So always considering what you are protecting. Next thing that you can enable on the advanced security part is session tracking. Now, session tracking is like brute force protection, but it works for sessions. Every time that you access a web application, the web application will generate a session for you, okay, because it has to track you down. Now, if you are smart, you can create a type of attack that is called session starvation attack. It means that you are continuously requesting new sessions to the point where the web application doesn't have any sessions valid anymore. Okay, you use the whole pool. What is happening? Denial of service. Okay, your web application says, sorry, I cannot log you in because I am done with session IDs. Or sorry, I cannot show you this page because, again, I'm done with the session IDs. So in this case, you can basically track down the amount of sessions, again, per public IP address in a time frame. Okay, again, the keywords here are sessions, IP, and time frame. Now, where do we configure session tracking? Session tracking is not configured in the URL policy, but we have a specific section that is called session tracking. If you edit this section, you will see that the system will show you, it will ask you for the interval. In this case, default is 60 seconds. And also, it will ask you what is the session ID. Now, these are the most common session identifiers that we have for most web applications. Okay, so you can track them down from here. Okay, so you say, for example, PHP session ID. That's the what it's going to be tracked. Now, the last thing that we're going to configure in the advanced security, and then we will have lunch break, and then we will have lab time, is web scraping. Now, web scraping protection is a new functionality of the web application firewall that was introduced with version 8.1, the latest firmware release. Now, first, what is web scraping? Web scraping is a technique used by some attackers to gather information about your company, the products that you sell, information about your employees, information about your customers, and so on. And it involves an automatic system that will start to crawl your web application to get as many information as possible. Okay, so it will basically scan the application, retrieve all the information, so then maybe you can resell this information, you can hijack a marketing campaign, you can get the prices of a product, then you can disclose these products, and so on. All right? Now, the same way that these automated bots are crawling your web application is used by some other automated bots that are doing this because it's their job, like Google. Now, when Google will scan your web application, it is to index your web application. So then it is easier for your customers, for example, to find you in Google. So this is something that most likely you want. Okay, you want that Google, Bing, Yahoo, and whatever will scan your web application. Otherwise, maybe they will never find you using a search engine. So what's the difference between the Google bot, the automatic system, and an evil bot? Well, the differences are very, very, very subtle. Okay, you actually have to create some traps to see if the bot that is scanning your web application is a good bot or an evil bot. All right? So web scraping protection will allow you to do this. Will allow you to say, OK, you're Google. All right, go ahead. You can do this. Or who are you? I don't know you. OK, let's see what you're doing. Let's set up some traps, some honey traps, and let's see what you do. If you fall for one of these traps, then you're going to be blocked. Okay, because I know what you're doing. You're doing web scraping. Okay? So how do we configure web scraping? web scraping is configured in two parts of the interface. First, we have to go to website web scraping. And the first thing that you define is a list of whitelisted bots. Okay. Normally, we already include the most common bots like Bing, Google, Twitter, Yahoo, Baidu, Yandex, and so on. Okay. So this bots list is defined by using the user agent. Okay. These are common user agents like Google bot, for example, and the host. Okay. The host will be used to match if the request actually is coming from Google, okay, or the IP address. Okay, so we're going to do a lookup and say, is this really Google, or is somebody that is using the Google bot agent? Because remember, you can change your user agents. Okay, you can forge requests. You don't trust users. You don't know who is on the other side. So at least we have some kind of security that the request is coming from Google. Okay, and it is most likely Google that is scanning our web application. So this is for whitelisting. Then you create your policy. In your policy, you can set two things. You can set honey traps and the bot detection. Now, what's the difference? The difference is that with honey traps, we're going to see if we have a good bot or a bad bot or an evil bot. Okay, so who is actually scanning our web application? Bot detection will actually try to understand if on the other side we have really a bot or we have somebody with a browser that is browsing our web application. So maybe that's not really an attack. It is a web scraping attack. Maybe it's for forceful browsing. Somebody that is trying to, for example, list all the directories and so on. So let's begin with honey traps. Okay, what can we do with honey traps? Now, the first thing that we can do is insert in the response some hidden links. So in the HTML page, we're going to change the code a little bit, and we're going to insert a link that will never be displayed in a normal browser. Okay, so if you load the page, you will not see that link. Bots, on the other hand, will fall for this. Okay, and it will say, oh, that's a link. Boom, let's go. Okay, and let's see what is inside this hidden link. Another thing that we can do is play with the robot.txt file. What is the robot.txt file? This is a special file that you can put in your web server that defines what can be indexed or not of your web application. So Google, when it will index your web application, it will read this file and it would say, oh, OK, so I can index the home page, the customers page, the contact page. No, the products page cannot be indexed, or the login page cannot be indexed. OK, and normally Google will obey, will actually read the file and say, all right, this is what I'm going to do. What we're going to do is that with the honey traps, we're going to insert in this file some encrypted URLs. Okay, so some meaningless URLs. If we have a bot that does not respect what is written in the robot.txt file, that bot will fall for that trap. Will actually go into that encrypted URL. What the WAF will do is, as soon as we'll see that there is a request for that encrypted URL, it will block the client. Okay, it will block connections from that IP address. All right, like brute force, same concept. Okay, it will lock that client. Now, this is for honey traps. For bot detection, we use two ways to detect if we have a bot or another system on the other side. The first method that we can use is that we insert a JavaScript in the response, okay, in the code, in the HTML code. So the response will be then processed by maybe a web browser. So the web browser will then look at the code, parse the code, and say, oh, look at that, that's a script. What does this script want? It wants to do 4 plus 4. All right, let's do 4 plus 4. And he wants to put the result in a cookie. All right, let's put this result in a cookie. This is really that simple, OK? It's the JavaScript that does an arithmetical operation, put the result in a cookie, send the cookie to the WAF. The WAF will then receive the cookie and will say, oh, look at that. I have the cookie. The result is OK. Good. You're a browser. OK, most likely, you're a browser. On the other hand, bots don't process JavaScript. OK, they don't process scripts anymore at all. So what is happening is that the response will be received by the bot. The bot will say, who cares? Boom. And then it's going to be disregarded by the bot. The WAF will then not see the cookie in the subscription request and will say, all right, you are not a web browser, you're a bot, okay? Because you didn't give me the answer to my JavaScript question. Or another thing that we can do is put a delay in the robot.txt file, okay? Normally, if you're a browser, you don't care about this file. If you're a bot, somehow you have to wait for a moment until you can scan the other lines in the robot.txt files. If that's the case, well, in that case, you are a bot. Okay, so we can time using the delay time to identify if there is a bot or not. Okay, if the time is the same, then you're most likely bot. Once you have set, of course, you can set your whitelisted user agents and bots here. Okay, so you make sure that even if Microsoft will fall from the hidden links response, then you don't block Microsoft. Okay, so that's why we have the whitelisted bots. Now, after you configure your policy, you go to Advanced Security. Then in your policies, you scroll down, and here we have web scraping policies. Since we don't have any policy, we cannot select anything. But if we would have created some policies, then you could select the policy here. Okay. Again, remember that your URL policies are set using host, URL match, and extended match. Okay. So you can be very specific. Okay. Web scraping enabled for this part of the web application. Okay. Not enabled for the home page. Who cares? The home page is publicly available, and I don't care if bots are scanning it. All right. So do you have any questions regarding anything that we have seen this morning before we start the lunch break? Or let's say the long break. All right. If you don't have any questions, we will see each other in an hour. So at whatever is your time, 10 past. Okay. So after the lunch break,